Okay, I do want to get your thoughts on Trump. If you want to do maybe your overall thoughts on him, you don't have to go too deep into it, but just like it could be his
No, this.
presidency as a whole or just in general. But really, I want to get your thoughts on the raid of. So my understanding is he took some documents, and I
Oh,
have
this is gonna
not
be
looked
good.
into this at all. So can you talk about the raid, what he maybe took, why did the raid happen, what was the result of it, and do you think because of this situation he'll be able to run again in 2024 or not?
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna give brief background stuff. Then that Trump is what you'd call a populist candidate. Um, that means slightly different things, slightly to different people. But I would summarize it like this: uh, political division in the political process is upsetting to people. Oftentimes, Trump kind of ran as, I mean, drain the swamp was his like slogan for a little while. Like, I'm not a politician. I'm just a popular guy. That's why you should elect me. And I think what we've seen more and more is Trump just says a lot of things, and he kind of says whatever comes to his mind. And when you're already the populist candidate and you're not being political when you talk. So like the way I talk a lot, which is kind of like, it just depends. It's like, not really, there isn't a good answer to your question. People don't want to hear that shit anymore. So like Barack Obama was a person who threaded the needle really well in how he talked, because he kind of gave those answers, but he made it seem a little more direct. Bill Clinton is a great example of a person who was like the ultimate politician in the way he talked. Like, he never really knew what he said. He famously said under oath, that depends on what your definition of is. Uh,
I think I
so
do.
like
Yeah.
Trump's the opposite, and that's why people like him. They perceive him as honest because he's being genuinely an asshole. But I don't think he really means anything. But that's the state of where we are today. We have a person who's kind of inserted into the middle of this like political division, and people were hungry for it. He recruited support from both sides of the aisle. As far as I think he made some terrible decisions, and I think like he could have just done a couple things well at the end of his presidency, and he would have like immediately been reelected. Regardless, that's I could talk for hours. What's happening right now is, well, you have a couple things. You have the January 6th incident, right, and you have issues about what is treason, what is incitement. Those are things that have legal definitions, but like we kind of want to read intent into them as an important element. And can Trump be responsible for something someone else did? Uh, did he direct it? We don't know. So we've got that going on over here. We have all these people who were involved in that, on the ground level, being prosecuted and getting like real jail time. And we have a bunch of people that we think might connect it to Trump, and we have Trump basically saying, "That wasn't me," even though like right before he was like, "We'll take that shit." uh, Totally unrelated, I'm sure. Then we have, now he's no longer in office. There's some pretty good reports that there's kind of like a changing of hands that happens as administrations change, and Trump was just kind of like, I think he thought he wasn't going to leave even after he lost the election, which happens in November. So this riot happens in January. Apparently, like, they were like firing people if they were packing their things up. This is all just what I've heard, or I'm not like citing anything, but um, I think I don't know that he necessarily. So there's two trains of thought, right? Like, I don't know that he necessarily intended to just take a bunch of stuff that he knew he wasn't supposed to have. That's one end. That's like the plausible deniability element on one side is like, maybe he's just like not very organized and they just took a bunch of shit, right? And then on the other side, you have this like the far other end is like Trump is a Russian agent, and or someone in Russia, whatever, however you want to frame it, has dirt on him, and he was jockeying for things that were advantageous to them the whole time he was in office. and he took this stuff intentionally so that he could basically continue being useful even though he's no longer in office. Like those, I think those are the two ends of the spectrum. Although maybe you could say, I guess the even further pro-Trump end of the spectrum is basically the arguments he's making right now, which are these are all my documents anyway. I can do them. I can take them if I want, and they were no longer classified because I declassified them, but I didn't tell anyone. Like, there's even been an argument made, I think he tweeted it or whatever his version of Twitter is now, saying, I can declassify something just by thinking. And I was like, so, but it's not that crazy. So, I mean, it is obviously, but like, there's a legal theory behind this called unitary executive theory. Basically, Bill Barr has, not Bill Burr, I love that guy. Bill Barr has, was that his chief of staff or was it just the attorney general? I think he was the attorney general. Has like a long documented history of basically what he calls unitary executive theory, which is essentially like the president has the ultimate power and he can kind of do what he wants. And so like, it's basically the line that like, it's not illegal if the president does it.
Yeah, I get it. So if he says it's
so
declassified,
I can think it's
anyone.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's really the far pro-Trump line. What's fascinating is Trump loses in court a lot more than people realize. He's just usually able to either control the narrative or drag things out through various appeals and motions so long that it's either not a story or he can get out of it by like changing his position or because the issue becomes moot. There's a couple of requirements for like standing. One of them is mootness, or is ripeness, basically meaning that like if there's no like way to remedy the situation because it's already happened and there's no like remedy that is damages or money back. Basically, if all you want is an injunction to stop them from doing something and he drags out the court process long enough to the point where it's already done, now you don't have a remedy, so it's moot. Trump is really good because he just has a bunch of attorneys at getting things just dragged out forever. So what's happening right now, and this is really your question, but I think that background is useful.
Yeah. No, it was
is he took all this stuff and the institution that noticed is the National Archives, which is a bunch of librarians that like keep track of shit. And I don't know the exact timeline, but they asked him for it. They told him he had things he wasn't supposed to have because they were missing a bunch of boxes that said classified, and he refused to give them back. So regardless of, unless you think he can do whatever he wants, and because he did it when he was president, or thought it because he was president, now the things he has, even though he's not president, aren't classified. Like, I've literally heard people say, those are his documents. And I'm like, no, they're fucking not. They belong to the United States of America. But we have this situation here where, regardless of whether he did it intentionally or not, they told him, you have this stuff. We need it back. And he just refused. So the FBI got a warrant and went to his house and took it. And they're performing an investigation. What's funny is, so remember what I was saying about like GOP kind of reforming the judiciary with young, what I think I've read that like the ABA had issued a recommendation of not qualified to like 20% of the judges he's appointed, which is pretty phenomenal. But that means that 80% of them were qualified, just maybe a little politically right. This stuff gets taken and he goes and files, I can't remember the exact case he filed, but I think it was an injunction to prevent them from looking at it because like mixed in with it is stuff that he owns that is classified, or isn't classified, but is like private property. And he files this injunction to prevent the FBI and the Department of Justice from looking at the stuff, which is hilarious because it was like 500 boxes and this was like 3 weeks later. They'd already looked through it all. They already know what it was. But he wants to prevent it. Yeah, like this doesn't, it's stupid. He wants to prevent it from being released. So then he's like, release the warrant, release the affidavit for how you asked for the warrant. And the DOJ was like, This is what I think is going on. Trump took so much stuff, he doesn't know what he took that was bad. I think that that's kind of the middle. But he did ignore when they said give it back. And so he wants them to disclose what they thought he had. And so they're like, we're not going to give out the affidavit that we had to submit to the judge to get the warrant because it will compromise our investigation. And so they're like, well, we'll release it, but we're going to redact a bunch of stuff. And so they did, and it's like half blacked out, like it's
Right.
like
So
unreadable.
you don't really know.
But he doesn't really want that. He just wants to know what he's not supposed to have had. So then he can go back and say, well, I declassified that stuff. But because he doesn't even know what he took, he can't say I declassified it because he doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, because he took so much
So
stuff and he didn't ever really look at it. He's not even sure what it is, I guess.
yeah, people think that he so on one end, right, is like maybe he took nuclear secrets and maybe he took like information of spies we have abroad and he was going to like give them to Russia in exchange for like not compromising him, right? What I don't really know that I think it's that far, maybe, but I think this is more just a chess game of he fucked up and he can't just hide behind being the president anymore. And so then we have in November is the midterms, and so Trump, I think what he was trying to do is drag this out until November and then say, I'm running for president again. Because he could say it now, but I think that people don't like put any credit behind it before the midterm. And then he would say, they're just investigating me because I'm running for president. So this is what I think the strategy is behind this. And so he goes in front of a judge that he appointed that has no jurisdiction over this at all and asks her to submit this order. And she does. And everyone's like, why the fuck this isn't your thing. Like, it's not, this happened in Washington, D.C. or in Florida, right? No, it's a federal. Yes, I think it's just D.C. I think you would have to go to a district court there. And he just went to some other court and the judge was like, yeah, you can't do this. And the FBI's like, this isn't your case. You have no authority over this. They could have just said, okay, well, enforce it. But, then you'd have a narrative that they could run and spin. Instead, they said, okay, well, we can do it here, but we're not disclosing all of this stuff. And then Trump was like, I demand a special master, which is basically a person who has security clearance to look over things that are of that classified nature, but also can act as a judge in determining whether or not they can have things that he has that they're not supposed to have taken. There's like two pockets of things, right? My stuff that you shouldn't have taken and stuff that was declassified, but I don't have to like tell you why or what it was because I don't know what it is. And what's funny is two things now happen. So they both make lists of people and they settle on one person that is from the Trump's list to be the special master. But they simultaneously appeal to the 11th Circuit, which is the appeals court for this court, basically saying she has no jurisdiction over this case. This case needs to be thrown out. And that takes a little while to happen. And so what happens within 24 hours of each other is the special master basically says, go fuck yourself, Trump. The special master that is from his list, like totally, oh my God, he's like making, his lawyers are making the argument that they don't have to disclose what it is that they declassified. And the special master says, in law, you have what's called a prima facie case. So it means it speaks for itself, or it means basically like this is the default case of this. So like we can assume these are classified because it's in a box marked classified. And unless you give us evidence as to why it's not declassified or why it is declassified, I'm going to assume it's classified. Basically, the onus, the burden of proof here is on you. And they don't have any evidence because they don't even know what it is, I think.
That makes sense.
And so they're kind of in a spot there because they picked this judge. And then his name is Deary, which like the transcripts are incredible. Then on the other side, the 11th Circuit strikes it down and says, yeah, you don't have jurisdiction over this. So he lost on both fronts. and they're going to continue with their investigation, and they're going to bring charges, and they're going to do it before November 11th, or before November. Then on the other side, in the state of New York, the attorney general for the state of New York filed like massive charges the other day, basically saying that Trump has been like defrauding the IRS this entire time, his like entire career, basically going back to his father. What they would do is lie about the value of their assets to get loans and insurance from banks. And then so they would appreciate their assets, and then they would depreciate their assets and reporting it to the IRS. So this is tax fraud. And so the state of New York brought civil charges, which they can do. It's the attorney general can bring civil charges, and they against him, Ivanka, Kushner, and Trump Jr. And then they're saying he made $250 million off of this fraudulent scheme over the course of like 30 some years.
Okay.
So you have some other issues that come from that. Statute of limitations on this is 6 years, but there's like a clause basically saying if they're all related, it can go back.
Okay.
And I think this is fascinating because Trump's biographer has said that like their evaluation was his net worth is like $470 million, which is like way less than he says it is. But I think it's funny because $250 million is like half of that.
Right.
And that's a state charge. So this is separate from all the other stuff that's happening. All this happened in like a week.
Do
So
you
things are
think
getting
that
a little hot.
I haven't heard about that case in New York. Do you think they have any proof of that? I mean, they probably do if they filed a case.
Oh yeah, I'll send you the complaint.
Okay.
This was a New York Times article that came out like 2017 about this. They had kind of figured this out, and it just all got dropped because a lot of other stuff happened. But the Attorney General for the state of New York picked it up and has been performing this investigation the last several years.
So, I mean, maybe something will come of this, but my whole like perception of Trump is he's like this unicorn that,
Teflon.
I mean, people just like basically when he was running for president, I mean, just accusation after accusation that would totally derail any politician, like any one of them. And
Yeah.
I honestly think it was in the hundreds. It was like every day or every week some new accusation, and I didn't even know the merits of them. I stopped reading them after a while, but they were horrible. And
Grab her by the pussy. Yeah, like
yeah,
stuff was just coming out left and right. But he was the populist candidate, so nobody cared.
well, it was
They
almost
like
like
him
there was
because
so much.
everybody does this. So like he's being honest about it. And then it got to the point where they were like, there's so much stuff he could have there's no way he did all this. So like how do we even know what's true and
Can't
what's
even
not?
remember all of it. Pretty soon there's just the newest
Yeah.
accusation and it's sensational, and you just like don't even, every single day the news headlines are all terrible things. And then the next day there's just
Yeah.
a new list of terrible things, and you kind of just like quickly forget that something terrible is happening yesterday, So I don't know. I'm skeptical that
Yeah.
any of these
Yeah,
cases do
it's
anything to Trump.
right, right. But then you have this thing happening when he's running for president, right? And people didn't really think he was going to win.
No, I
No,
didn't.
like I
No.
mean, I think 538, who's definitely like the most accurate polling source out there, had him at a 20 to 30% chance to win, which is much bigger than people realize. It means 3 out of 10 times he wins. We're in one of those 3. But then once he was president, like it didn't matter what came out. He was just like, I have executive privilege. I don't like, which is not what that means. He would just refuse to comply with subpoenas. He would refuse to comply with everything. So like, I don't know that he was ever exonerated of anything that happened when he was president, whether he was accused of it from before or whether he was accused of it during. I mean, we literally had a person, this guy gets impeached and the Republicans just controlled the Senate. So they're just like, they refused. In fact, Mitt Romney got like crucified for voting to hear the testimonies of other people because you're impeached. The House basically tries the case and the Senate votes, and the Senate was Republican controlled. But so like they wanted to vote to just not even hear the evidence at the trial. They didn't care. And Mitt Romney was like, I want to hear what they have to say. And the Republicans were like, how dare you? So like that's a kangaroo court. There's nothing real about that. And then the best part is then he gets impeached again, but he's already left office, right? And the whole argument they kept making is you can't impeach someone after they're out of office. And it's absolutely false. The first impeachment ever was someone who was already out of office. The dual purpose of impeachment is to prevent them from being able to hold office again.
Makes sense.
So, like,
I mean,
I kept hearing people say that shit, and I was like, just Wikipedia impeachment. It's right there.